Welcome back to SheCan, or in this case today, WeCan, where we have role models that inspire by telling their stories. And I'm excited to talk to Sam Daley-Harris. Welcome, Sam, to SheCan or WeCan today. You are a democracy activist and author. You are the author of Reclaiming Our Democracy. It was published more than 30 years ago under Healing the Break Between People and Government, and now has been republished as Every Citizen's Guide to Transformational Advocacy. Sam, you're also a real leader and innovator in the field of citizen advocacy. You have more than 40 years of experience developing, implementing, and training others to use proven strategies that empower everyday people to become change makers. You're also the founder of Civic Courage, where you train non-for-profit organizations to deliver transformational advocacy so that their members can create champions in Congress and the media for their cause. You also co-founded the Microcredit Summit Campaign with Nobel Peace Prize laureate Muhammad Yunus, and I know it very well. I've been running projects in Africa, and I've known about you for a long time and have very detailed studied Muhammad Yunus. Sam, tell us a bit more about yourself and those pivotal points that brought you to where you are today.
Yes, thank you. It's so wonderful to be with you. I want to say that to begin with. When I tell about my journey, I use a thing called a story of self that was developed by a Harvard professor, Marshall Gans. And it basically asks, what happened in your life and what decisions did you make that got you to this commitment? And so I'm going to tell my story of self. But when I do, I always ask viewers and listeners to think about their story. What happened in your life and what decisions did you make that got you to this podcast and to your commitment? So here's my story of self. I have a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in music, and I played percussion instruments in the Miami Philharmonic Orchestra for 12 years and taught high school music. And 45 years ago, I founded the anti-poverty lobby Results. And a lot of times I'm asked, music, poverty lobby, what's the connection? And when I look back in my life, there's certain experiences that start pointing me in a different direction. The death of a friend around high school graduation in 1964, and the assassination of U.S. Senator Robert Kennedy around college graduation in 1968 got me to asking the questions of purpose. Why am I here? What am I here to do? What's my purpose? 9 years later, it's now 1977, I'm invited to a presentation on ending world hunger put on by the Hunger Project. And I go to this event thinking, well, hunger's inevitable. Well, what do I know? I'm a musician. I mean, it's inevitable in my mind because there must be no solutions. Again, what do I know? Because if there were solutions, somebody would
Would
have
be
done
doing
something by
it.
now. But I go to this event and it's obvious right away there's no mystery to growing food, clean water, basic health, literacy. I'm not hopeless about the perceived lack of solutions. I'm hopeless about human nature. People will just never get around to doing the things that can be done. But there's one human nature I have some control over, my own, and my question, why am I here? What am I here to do? So I get involved in a big way, and this is the end of the story. In 1978 and 1979, I spoke to 7,000 high school students, classroom by classroom, on ending world hunger. And
Mm.
before I went into the first classroom, I read some statements from Jimmy Carter's Commission on World Hunger calling for the political will to end hunger. So I asked 7,000 students, what's the name of your member of Congress? I don't want to know if you wrote them. I don't want to know if you, just the name. Out of 7,200, fewer than 3% could answer correctly. 6,800, over 97% couldn't tell me the name
Yeah.
of their member of Congress. And results, this anti-poverty lobby grew out of this gap between the calls for the political will to end hunger on the one hand and the lack of basic information on who represent us in Washington on the
Mm,
other.
mm. Sam, and so tell us a bit more how you then set up Civic Courage when you republished the book. I mean, you have a very big vision, you have a very big purpose. It's very important in this day and age where we are fighting against a far right that basically wants to get rid of the democracy and the system that we live in and that we choose to live in and that we care a lot about. So tell us a bit more about the steps that brought you to really now being even more important than you were throughout, your whole life.
Yeah, well, so there's so many things I could unpack there, but a little bit about the steps. I was a substitute teacher in the early 80s when Results was being formed in the early 1980s, 4.5 years. And in the United States, Eastern Airlines and Delta Airlines used to offer 21 flights for $649 if you did them in 21 days. And I would take a
Wow.
3-week leave from substitute teaching and go out on the road speaking, starting chapters,
Mm,
really.
mm,
And I would, so I did 5 21 city trips over an 18-month period.
wow.
So really, I visited 55 cities twice, basically,
Incredible. Mm,
because I would revisit after a chapter was launched. I'd go back for months later. And so, yeah, so it's very grassrootsy. It was very trial and error. It's very substitute teacher in the day, on the phone and starting chapters, and on the road sometimes at in the afternoon and at night. So it was 15 years running, starting and running Results, this anti-poverty lobby.
yeah,
And then it was 17 years with the Microcredit Summit Campaign. And we'd set a goal in 1997 of reaching 100 million of the world's poorest families, especially the women
yeah,
of those families, with credit for self-employment and other financial and business services. And we achieved that goal 2 years later. It would have been 2005, achieved in 2007.
yeah.
And so at the end of my time with the Microcredit Summit Campaign, and I'll stop with this, I asked myself, I don't know how many more years there are left. What is it that you want? What is it that's lit you up the most, that's least fulfilled in the world?
Mm,
And that was this whole thing about citizen empowerment and what we call transformational advocacy. And that's when I went back to coaching other organizations of delivering transformational advocacy, groups like Citizens Climate Lobby or the Quaker Lobby, Friends Committee on National Legislation. And so that's been a bit of that particular part of the journey.
yeah. Which is so important right now. And you've done so much groundwork and you have been listening to so many people, Sam. So tell us a little bit more about republishing the book, Reclaiming Our Democracy.
Yeah, yes.
What is the essence and what are your main messages?
Well, I'm going to answer two questions there. Its essence is transformational advocacy. And I'll talk about that for a moment. And then the other question is, why publish? And I want to get to that in a moment. So in the book, well, everybody knows transactional advocacy. Sign the petition, transaction complete. But
Yeah,
with transformational advocacy, you're trained, encouraged, and then succeed at doing things as an advocate you never thought you could do, like meet with a member of parliament and bring them on board to your issue. And when you do those things, you see yourself differently.
yeah,
That's the transformation. Seeing myself differently from I could never to I just did that, that kind of transformation. I want to get to the why republish. And it's been really dramatically updated. There have been 12 chapters removed and 7 new chapters added, kind of thing. And so I was on this interview a year ago in the United States. A national interview goes to hundreds of stations in the United States. So I was really moved by how vulnerable this host, this interviewer was. This was question number two. In a 13-minute interview, he said, the passive nature to our politics today, you can feel beat down by it. I mean, this is my career, and I feel beat. This is a national interviewer, and I feel beat down by it. I don't participate the same way others do because I'm a political journalist, but I do have to pay attention. It's a grind. It's a grind, Sam. I mean, I know you know that. What am I feeling? What's the way out of that? I was
Yeah.
really, that's the question. Um,
Yes.
he really spoke to the anxiety that are in so many people and why I republished the book. The first thing I said to him was, uh, Apollo astronaut Rusty Schweickart said, we aren't passengers on Spaceship Earth, we're the crew.
Mm.
Well, are we? And if we're crew, how does crew operate? The second thing I said to him was, futurist and climate activist Alex Steffen said, in fact, these days, cynicism is obedience. Well, yeah, if I'm cynical, I'm obedient to the way things are. I'm not going to do anything. Why would I if nothing I do makes a difference? And so I think those lessons are really important. If I could tell one other quick story, since that interview, on the email, I've met an author, a professor at Stanford, who wrote a book. I love this title, Hope for Cynics: The Surprising Science of Human Goodness.
Mm.
And in the book, he says, if you're cynical, it's like you're playing poker, but you fold your hand before the game even starts.
Yeah.
And I say, if you're a civic, it's like you fold your hand before the parliament is even sworn in, before the first bill is even introduced. So I think there's some good lessons there.
Yeah, really good lessons. And yeah, this capitulating before you've even started. I mean, this is something that we're trying to get across with this SheCan or WeCan platform, where we interviewed more than 500 role models, is that you pay a little rent on this earth that we call home, and that every one of us has to find a way to contribute to the greater good in small or big ways. It doesn't matter. But if everybody would do something, that we would be in a different place. So, Sam, in your own, mind, how can we now uphold democracy, and how can we find ways or common ground and consensus and build a successful opposition and find our way back to each other in this very divided world? I mean, I understand this is a massive question, and there is, but just in terms of how do you think about it? How do you think
Yes.
about
Well,
it?
let me tell a story and then answer the question.
Yeah.
Uh, I'm going to tell the story of Ellie Sparks, who was a volunteer in Citizens Climate Lobby when she told me this story. And then now she's on staff. And she said to me, um, she was suffering from climate trauma when
Mm.
she joined Citizens Climate Lobby, CCL. She said, I would read Bill McKibben's book, Earth, and I would weep at home and I would weep at work. And then she joined Citizens Climate Lobby, and 18 months later, she's co-leading a workshop on developing relationships with members of Congress and editorial writers. And at the end of this little segment that's in the book, Reclaiming Our Democracy, she says she has 20 meetings with 20 congressional offices over 4 days. And she says, going into their offices was hard. I had to let go of a lot of emotional baggage. I could no longer judge them or hold hostility in my heart toward them. I had to let go of my fear of climate change and my fear that they wouldn't listen to me. I had to center myself in love, releasing fear and centering in love. This is sacred and profound work. So she started at climate trauma and ended at sacred and profound.
Mm,
That's the transformation. And so your question is, and I'm going to answer it this way, like, how do you engage? And a lot of times people ask me, well, what do I look for to know whether an organization is working to deliver transformational advocacy? And I simplify it to three things. One, recruitment and community building. Recruitment, they bring the new people in, not just to build an e-blast list, but to form them into local chapters so they're not working alone. That's the recruitment,
yeah.
local chapters. Community building is part of number one. So the organization might have a whole of organization monthly webinar with guest speakers, Q&A every month, inspiration. So recruitment and community building is one thing you look for. Two, training. How do you get the meeting with the elected? How do you plan for it? What do you ask for in the meeting? How do you write a letter to the editor? Two, training. Three, breakthroughs. The organization encourages breakthroughs. In the book, there's a small drawing of a circle labeled your comfort zone. And next to it is a much larger circle labeled where the magic happens.
Mm,
And you're looking for an organization that won't kick you out, but encourage you out of your comfort zone over to where the magic happens.
yeah.
And so I think in the program notes, there'll be a link to a sign-up sheet where you can let me know you'd like some help in being connected to an organization that delivers recruitment and community building, training, and encouraging breakthroughs, which is what you're really looking for.
Yeah. Sam, yes, all your handles and your information will be on here. Sam, you've had this very impactful life and you are full of insights and wisdom about how to do this transformational advocacy work. What matters to you now and how do you want to matter? What do you want your legacy to be?
Yeah. Well, in some sense, my legacy is in the people who, even today, are empowered in results or in Citizens Climate Lobby or the Quaker Lobby, or there's a new group that I'm coaching in the US, the United Church of Christ Climate Hope Affiliates. So,
Mm,
in the actions that they take, and I'm going to tell you about a call I had last week. I was talking to a fellow in Utah, the state of Utah. And he was saying that in September is their annual hike with their US senator. And he said when the US senator was first elected to the House in 2017, he took office, he announced a town hall meeting hike. And it was going to be an 8-hour hike with your new congressman. And there were 8 people that showed up, 6 of them from Citizens Climate Lobby. And a year later, he promised that he would do a hike just with Citizen Climate Lobby volunteers. This is a Republican senator. I'm going to tell one story about him. But this year, the hike, this is 2025, it'll be about a 3-hour hike. And they expect 30 of volunteers to join. That's not usual.
no.
That's not most people like they won't listen to me or I just left a message at the switchboard or I signed a petition or whatever. But to spend 3 hours with your US senator, that's not usual. And when he was in the House, and I'll stop here, he founded a conservative climate caucus, frankly, out of his hikes with them
Yeah.
in 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. And by the end of last year, there were 87 Republicans in the conservative climate caucus. Quite frankly, some of them not that serious and some of them serious, some of them greenwashing and some of them serious kind of thing. But that's part of the legacy, really.
Yeah,
The whole
that's
notion that 30 folks from Utah will be hiking with their senator for 3 hours in September. And
and
yeah,
how much impact they can have.
oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I
Yeah.
mean,
So
in the end,
it's,
it's we are all humans and we're all connected. And even though we get fed this story that
yeah,
we aren't, but we are, and we inspire each other every day. And the stories we tell and the stories we choose to hear make a huge difference.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Sam, so what how do you feel your role is now? What does
yeah,
success look like for you in these very pivotal times? I mean, you
yeah,
have a midterms coming up next year.
yes,
How do you look at that? How do you feel you play a role
yeah.
in
Let me answer
American
that.
politics, but also civic life, right? I mean, every
Yes,
citizen. I mean, to turn this around, it's going to take quite a bit.
yeah. Let me answer that a few ways. One way, elections are really important, but so is the time between elections.
Yeah.
Protests are really important, but we need people going inside too.
Mm,
And so transformational advocacy is especially about between elections. And transformational advocacy is especially about going inside. And so I want to give you another, it's a little bit legacy and certainly a little bit hope. Results started lobbying on child survival and maternal and child health 41 years ago in
mm,
1980. Sorry, 1984.
before.
And in 1984, UNICEF, the UN Children's Fund, was reporting 40,000 children around the world dying every day from preventable things, things like measles, coupled with malnutrition. And results volunteers have lobbied every year for 41 years, and the global child death rate has fallen by 66% from 40,000 a day to 13,125 a day. Um, but then Elon Musk and Donald Trump and Marco Rubio come along and do devastating cuts to the U.S. Agency for International Development. And the first time in 40 years, the global child death rate is likely to go back up. Here's the good news. The House, this is a Republican House Appropriations Committee, just finished their work in July 2025, and they basically rejected Donald Trump's drastic cuts to global health for next year. I mean, he asked maternal child health in the US was funded for globally 915 million. Trump asked for 85 million. The House committee agreed to 915 million. The global fund to fight AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria was this year 1.65 billion. President Trump asked for 800 million. The committee agreed to 1.5 billion. So for the first time, I'm seeing um, Congress people stand up,
Mm,
Congress people get a spine. And I think that's an important. Now it moves to the Senate Appropriations Committee. Will they agree to reject Donald Trump's drastic cuts to global health for next year, fiscal year 2026? I hope so. But every year, results volunteers and others have gotten their congresspeople, senates, to sign letters to the chairs of the top appropriating committees on global health. Well, doing that for decades finally is going to be paying off. And maybe instead of this, it'll continue.
continue downward.
The decline in global child deaths will continue.
Yeah. Sam, so what tips do you have for our young people who feel very disconnected at the moment? They
Yeah,
feel very
yeah,
disappointed. They feel
yeah,
very disconnected. They feel they have absolutely no power in this. This is
yeah.
much bigger than them. What
Yes.
tips do you
Yeah.
have when you speak to young people?
Okay. Well, one tip is, and I'm going to tell a story. One tip is give up, and number two is get connected with an organization that will feed you power. And I'll go over that in a moment. But
Yeah.
here's the story. I was talking to the head of organizing, this is maybe 7 years ago, for a very large organization. Everyone listening and watching would know the name of this organization. And he said to me, we can't let our volunteers write letters to the editor or op-eds because they'll get it wrong and misrepresent the organization. Protecting their brand
Mm,
was more important than empowering their volunteers. So one of the groups I coached for its first 7 years, Citizens Climate Lobby, this group was saying they'll get it wrong and misrepresent the organization. CCL said, well, what do we have to do to help them get it right?
mm,
And give that to them. And the year before COVID, their volunteers had 4,300 letters to the editor, op-eds and editorials published. One saying they'll get it wrong, the other saying, what do we have to do to help them get it right? And as a result, they had these 4,300 letters, op-eds, and editorials published. One group is not feeding you power, and the other group is. Now, I have to be honest, I always use this little story and quote from before COVID because transformational advocacy was so much about getting together.
yeah.
And during COVID, instead of 50 in this room and 40 in this room and 30 in this room, it was back one by one by one by one by one on Zoom for their monthly webinar. So it kind of broke it apart, and now it's kind of reconstituting. So, yeah.
Yeah, they're really good tips. Yeah.
Oh, if I
Sam,
could just add this. So for the young person, find an organization that feeds you power.
yeah.
In the program notes will be a link to a sign-up sheet where you can ask me for help uh, in connecting with a group like that, number one. And number two, if you have a speaking opportunity to your group, a group of friends, your class, your club, your place of worship, you can let me know that too.
Yeah, and speak up, make your voices heard, be aligned. What are you standing for? Now is the time to act, to understand what you stand for and to act, whether that's small or big, it doesn't matter. Sam, and what would you say are you most proud of when you look at your life's work?
Mm, mm, yeah. Um, I'm going to give you a quote, and in the quote is what I'm most proud of, and I'll share that in a moment. I shared the little sentence from it earlier. It's by Alex Steffen, and the quote is, optimism is a political act. Those who benefit from the status quo are perfectly happy with a large population of people who believe nothing will get any better. In fact, these days, cynicism is obedience.
Hmm.
What's really radical is being willing to look right at the magnitude and the difficulty of the problems we face and still insist we can solve those problems. I'm going to repeat the quote if you don't mind. And that's alluding to what I'm most proud of. Optimism is a political act. The people were able to live into this quote. Optimism is a political act. Those who benefit from the status quo are perfectly happy with a large population of people who believe nothing will get any better. In fact, these days, cynicism is obedience. What's really radical is being willing to look right at the magnitude and difficulty of the problems we face and still insist we can solve those problems. End of quote. So, what I'm most proud of is creating structures of support that allow people to live into their dreams, to live into their aspirations, to live into that quote, live into their optimism, to live into facing the magnitude and difficulty of the problems we face and still insisting we
Yeah,
can solve those problems.
definitely. Sam, so what are your plans and goals? How is this year going to look like for you and the next year?
Yeah. Well, a couple things. One is I continue to pitch the media, pitch podcasters, write columns to get the word out. Because most people have never heard of transformational advocacy and don't
Mm,
quite believe it's possible.
mm,
So I have a major focus on getting the word out.
yeah.
And then that includes speaking to groups in person or on Zoom, kind of thing. And then the other piece of my work is the coaching, uh, coaching nonprofits in delivering transformational advocacy.
Yeah, amazing. Sam, and what takeaways would you like our listeners to have from your story?
Yeah. Well, I think the bottom line is you could make a much bigger difference than you ever imagined possible. And the secret is connecting with an organization that feeds you power, connecting with an organization that works to deliver transformational advocacy. So you're not doing it alone. I'm not going to say, oh, go write a letter to the editor. No, you need some coaching. Go meet with your member of parliament. Well, yeah, but you need group support and you need some training. And that's where these groups can come in very importantly and handy.
Sam, I'm so excited to have you on WeCan. I'm excited you got in touch. Each one of us can be an advocate, and you show how that is possible, and you show people how transformational that can be, not just for the greater good, but for each person themselves, because we know that happiness comes from being connected, being supportive, helping other people, being part of a bigger cause. And that is more powerful than stopping smoking and stopping drinking, etc. And I'm also excited that we can all be radical. And radical is looking at problems in the eye, knowing you can do something about it, and that cynicism is obedience. And I absolutely love that quote, and I will use it from now onwards. So thank you so much for leading so powerfully by example.
Thank you. It's a thrill to be with you.